This is Tech Unmuted, the podcast of modern collaboration, where we tell the stories of how collaboration tools enable businesses to be more efficient and connected. With your hosts, George Shainstein and Santi Cuellar. Welcome to Tech Unmuted.
Welcome to the latest episode of Tech Unmuted. Today we're going to talk about apps. So the thing to keep in mind when you talk about apps in Teams is these are things that are very business oriented kind of applications typically. So there is an analogy to the App Store on Apple, the Google Play Store, right? Those apps are typically a little different. They tend to be a bit more socially oriented or leisure or travel or something, right? Sports. Some of those kind of things are available in Teams, but what you generally see are much more business practical apps. One of my favorites is there's a survey tool that you can invoke in a meeting and do some really quick hit surveys with the participants of the meeting, and really intuitive to use. Couple of seconds literally to set up a question and launch it basically as fast as you can type. You can create the survey with it. Yeah. But there's a plethora of other apps that are out there. And you were at a Microsoft conference a couple months ago, Santi. Why don't you share a little bit on what they said about the number of apps and sort of what that looks like?
Oh, yeah. So this is the Microsoft 365 conference in Vegas back in May. And I remember I wrote it down. They said that currently in the Microsoft App Store, right, for Teams, we have over 100,000 custom apps.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's like, wait, 100,000 custom apps. And that was back in May. Imagine when we reconvene next year at the next Microsoft 365 conference a year later, yep. How many apps will there be? I mean, I find that just crazy. But I do like the survey app. I guess if we had to divide apps into like categories, you have what I would call like the core apps. These are apps that are kind of already embedded in Teams when you open up your Teams environment. So, there's a calendar app there. There's a channels, those types of apps. Those are kind of default functionalities of Teams, but they're essentially apps, right? And then you have apps that are created by Microsoft, which, by the way, they've done a good job, to your point, of creating apps that really matter, right? Yep. There are some custom apps that maybe have some gamification to it to kind of make I guess the work environment kind of fun. But honestly, the Microsoft apps for the most part are all about productivity and yep. Stuff like that. I don't know about you, but I have a favorite list of Microsoft apps. There's an app from Microsoft called a channel calendar. So those of you who are familiar with Teams, you have a team, and within a team, you can have a channel. Well, now you can have a calendar specific to that channel. So maybe that channel is all about planning an event or something. It's great because now you have your own standalone calendar. I thought that was genius. There's also an approvals app, and that approval app, similar to the survey app that you mentioned, but this is like you're trying to get sign off from people on something, and so you can attach what it is you want them to approve, and then ask for the approval, and nice. They have to literally go in there and sign off, and that's pretty cool. Of course, you have the Avatar app. That's our favorite yep. app, right? There is a new one called, there's a math app. And so any mathematical equation, you can plug it in there and it will figure it out for you. And so nice. That's great if you're like trying to crunch numbers or come up with some percentages or some predictability. You can plug in this information to the math app and get that. I like the whiteboard where you can actually draw. Great if you're trying to explain like some type of network design or engineering or trying to yep. draft something. One that's going to be a hit. This is going to be a hit. I'm telling you, this is going to be one of those things they talk about, and that is Sales Copilot.
Yes.
And so Sales Copilot replaced Viva Sales. So if you were familiar with Viva Sales has been renamed to Sales Copilot because now the Copilot AI module or engine is embedded into this, and you can tie it into, you ready for this? Salesforce.com or Microsoft Dynamics.
Nice.
And grab the customer info. It has really cool stuff, like you can basically grab an email from a customer and enter it into your Salesforce.com notes by just clicking on it. You have stuff like that. It's really cool. There's one that I got my eye on. This is a new one. It's under preview. So this is the next one I'm going to dive into. But I really like what I'm seeing. It's called Customer Insights. So similar to Sales Copilot, where it ties into a CRM, this one seems to be at the surface, from what I'm able to see, kind of like a pop-up, like the old, call center pop-ups where somebody would call in and boom.
And I saw that when you shared it. I took a look yesterday when you shared it.
Yeah. I want to peel that one back. It's in preview mode right now. And, we love to preview stuff. So that's next on our list. But let me tell you, one that I am really enjoying, and I can't wait to hear the results because we're implementing this live, is the virtual appointments, right? Yes. We did a whole podcast on this, right? But man, to be able to go to a website and say, I need to speak to somebody now, and have an appointment queue and have agents sitting there waiting to engage with a prospect in this format, in a video conference now, that's just going to be phenomenal. So, I mean, I can go on, but those are like the ones that really stand out for me from Microsoft. Those are the ones. And the other category I would put apps in is third-party apps. You know what I'm saying? Workday has a third-party app. Cisco WebEx has a third-party app. I have a third-party app that I love, and that's the Starbucks app. There's a Starbucks coffee app. I don't know if you guys knew this, but you can have a Starbucks coffee app in your Microsoft Teams, and you're asking yourself, well, why on earth would you have a Starbucks coffee app in your Microsoft Teams? What are you going to do? Order coffee? No, it's so that you can treat your colleagues to coffee. So you want to thank somebody for helping you, you send them a coffee credit, if you would, that they can literally go and use at their local Starbucks and get a free cup of coffee on you. You've paid for it in advance.
Nice.
Yes.
Where's my coffee?
Yeah. Oh, it's coming. You have to do something really, really great for me to give you a cup of coffee. And then there's the custom apps, right? Custom apps is what we're talking about. 100,000 plus of these. These are just apps from people who, they recognize there's like a gap or something that could be done better. You and I were talking about how we don't have email for Teams. Well, guess what? There's an app for that, right? And we found one. There's an app. There's a custom app that does that. So listen, the app world in Microsoft, specifically within Teams, is mind-blowing. And I think that most people today are probably leveraging just the tip of the iceberg of apps, and they're probably, I'm going to take a guess here.
Sure.
It's probably just Microsoft stuff, right? Because it's what shows up first, right? But I could see that changing over time, and I think part of the reason why people don't use more apps, honestly, is because I don't think they have a good practice on how to search. It's overwhelming. So how to search for an app, and there's a couple of things. Can
you give us a look, like what is the best way? I sometimes look for apps in Teams. Yeah. There's the apps button at the top.
Yeah, that's what I use.
But other times I look in the standard Teams interface, not in a meeting, and do some searches, right? I found there's a weather app in there, and there's a couple other ones that I ran across just by looking in there. I'm seeing now it said, more socially oriented stuff and games on other platforms. Yeah. One of the ones that pops up in my sort of top list of 3 when I'm in here is games for work. So
right.
But why don't you give us a look at some best practices for doing searches and where people should go to search?
Yeah, hold on. Let me switch my screen real quick. Let me pull up my Teams app. So the way I search for apps is I click on the app icon, and it just brings up this entire dashboard here, right?
And that's right on the left-hand side, right? So on the menu
Yeah.
bar all the way on the left, sort of
Yeah.
right in the center there.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the whole navigation bar on the left, typical navigation bar. And then, once you click on it, you get this dashboard. But so here's how I do it. First of all, if you specifically want to look at Microsoft apps, where Microsoft is the publisher, I go to categories and I just click on Built by Microsoft. And it'll load up here in a minute just a ton of Microsoft apps. And by the way, so some of my favorite Microsoft apps I mentioned earlier are in here. Something to note, not every app works the same way. Like some of these apps, when you add them, there'll be a separate icon on that navigation bar, right? Some of these apps will live inside of your messaging window. And so when you have a Microsoft Teams message window open and you have your message field where you're going to type in your message, underneath you have a bunch of little icons. Some of these apps will live there. And so, understanding where they live and how you activate them, it'll be intuitive. You'll know right away. But so this is, if you want to see Microsoft apps, there's your channel calendar I just mentioned earlier, right? So this is a great place to go and search for Microsoft specific apps. That's how I do it. Now, when I'm looking for an app to solve a problem, okay, the way I do it is I think about where does that problem live? So for example, you and I both know that there was a potential prospect that they were wondering how to tie Salesforce.com data into their Teams environment. We're like, well, I'm pretty sure there's an app for that, right? And so what I would do is in that case, I would come here to categories and I would search for the category that best kind of fits that problem. And in this case, it's sales and marketing because we are talking about Salesforce.com. And I come here, I start here. And so that's where we brought up, Sales Copilot, where Sales Copilot is able to tie into your CRM and provide you, you can have communication between teams and your Salesforce.com instance and provide you customer records as well. And that's also where I mentioned earlier about the customer insights. As you can see, it's in preview mode. So we're going to request access to this one so we can test it. But that's the second methodology I use. So I'm looking for an app to solve a problem. What's the problem? And where does that problem lie? In this case, it was a sales challenge that they were having. So I came to the sales and marketing section and I start to search. Sometimes you can tell by the name of the app if it's a fit. Other times you just have to kind of take your time to read through the description, okay? Those are the two most common methodologies I use, whether I'm searching for a Microsoft app or I'm trying to solve a problem. I look for the category. I personally don't use the industries category or search capability. But there is an industry one where if you're specific to like the healthcare industry, you can click on there and you'll see healthcare related apps. I personally don't use this one. The third option I use is the keyword search. And so, for example, my pet peeve, where's my email in Teams, right? Why isn't there an email? And so if I type in email and I just do a search, it'll start to search. First of all, it'll search for workflows. And then after, workflows will always come up first for some reason. And then eventually it'll show me apps. Let's see here if I can. Oh, there. I just had to expand apps. So that's good to know. There's a category called workflow, category called apps. Workflow was expanded. I just clicked on apps. And here's that T-mail I found the other day, right? It's a custom app, right? But I did it by searching with the keyword.
And there actually looks like there's more than when we had first looked at this.
Yeah, except that if you read the descriptions, right? So some of these, like for example, one is add an email to a Teams conversation. Well, I can do that today. I don't know.
Yep,
right?
we can do that.
Right, or enable texting on your business phone, okay, great, but we have a solution for that as well that we
Yep.
provided with our calling solutions. The one that really seems to be a good fit for what I want to do, which is read, receive, and compose emails inside of Teams, is that Tmail, which
Yep.
we haven't tested it yet, but it's it's one of those things that, again, I found it by searching for a keyword. So again, 3 methodologies. One is I go to the built by Microsoft apps if I want to find a specific Microsoft published app. I use categories, and I specifically look for business categories. I don't use industries necessarily, but you could. And then the third is I just use a keyword and see what else. I kind of drill down that way, and so that's how I do it. So let me just switch my screen back. So George, where do you see apps in 6 months, a year from now? Like what do you envision?
So a couple of things. I think there's 2 dynamics that'll take place. One, there's probably going to be a more standard way to integrate them in certain parts of Teams. I would suspect that you'll have some ability to sort of drag things around or move things around to customize it for your own view, right? Your own business purposes.
Oh, like a widget, like build a
Yes.
set of widgets where you create a dashboard with the apps you want when you want it. Okay, I like
Yes.
that idea. Yeah.
So like left-hand column there.
Listen to this podcast, Microsoft. We're giving you good feedback here. All right, go ahead.
And I think there's going to be a growing set of more industry-specific apps and sort of technology and platform-related apps, right? The AI and the workflow capabilities that are available in Microsoft 365 and Azure and some other platforms within the Microsoft ecosystem are going to continue to expand as we go through time. And we've talked about this repeatedly. There's a really rapid advancement in almost every single tool that's out there, especially the new AI and the process tools that they've put out.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing about it is it seems like every day we go in and something new is there, or if there was something that wasn't working exactly right, then all of a sudden it works.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to continue to see that rapid advancement over the next year. And you're going to see this store really become more prominent so that anything you can think of is probably going to be there, right? Somebody's going to try to address the need. And part of that's driven by the fact now there's well north, we believe, of 400 million users on 365 globally.
Yeah.
And roughly the numbers look like about 85% of that top level user number are active Teams users. And it grows every day, every month, every quarter, every year, right? And this is going to continue to grow and the ecosystem is going to continue to build. And again, the points we've made in other podcasts, it's a converged sort of consolidated platform, whatever words you want to use, right? But it's the ability to go into a single platform and do most of the work you need to do as a business professional. And that makes such a tremendous difference from having to use one thing for video and another thing for voice and another thing for content development or slide development. The list goes on of the various components that people try to cobble together. And that single platform really makes such a difference, right? It makes such a difference in the way you and I work and our team works that it's striking to when I joined 2.5 years ago and we used Microsoft applications, sort of the Office suite. But at the time, we're not on Teams, we're not on 365, right? And soon after I joined, we started testing it, right? And it was probably 3-4 months in that we made a hard shift. But I look at what we did before then and what we do now and take that convergence that has taken place and plug in all these apps that are going to fill the gaps, right? So think you're building a wall, and you've got mortar to put in the wall. Sometimes there's a gap. This is next. Sometimes it's a brick, right? And it's big. And sometimes it's just mortar to sort of link everything together. But I think that's where we're heading. And I think the business impact of all of those AI and those process changes and all of those tools, plus all of these extra external pieces
Mhm.
that plug an app in and plug another functionality in, I think we're going to look back a year from now and wonder how we operated today.
Yeah, it's true. I was actually thinking, not that I plan on going anywhere, but you imagine making a lateral move to some other organization. The first thing I'm thinking is, do they use Microsoft
Yeah.
365? Do they use Teams? And are they allowing access to the Power Platform? Otherwise, I'd be
Yep.
like, how am I gonna get anything done?
Yep.
For sure. I like the concept of the ability to customize your view using different apps. In other words, like that widget concept. I really like that. I really do hope Microsoft figures that out. That'd be great. Where you can kind of build your own dashboard with the specific apps that you want, whether it's tabulated or whatever the case may be. And then I do think that what we're going to see in the next, I'm going to say 6 months to a year, we're going to see 100% AI driven apps, where the apps are accomplishing, or they're pre-built or pre-configured AI modules.
Yep.
So we talk about low code, no code. No, this is pre-packaged AI modules. I could see that happening. And
that's the next step. If you think to one of our first podcasts we spoke about, might have been the first one, we talked about an article I'd written in Forbes about, you have pioneers, you have the Luddites, right?
Yeah.
So you have pioneers who are really aggressively doing stuff. You have the Luddites who are at the bottom, who are sort of against all the AI and the mechanization of things. And you have that group in the middle that waits for it to happen to them.
Right.
That's what's going to happen to them first. Their organization is going to make a decision to deploy a set of apps that are going to start to do things and recommend things, much like Viva did for me the other day when it said, hey, you should start your virtual commute. It's the end of your day. It was 6 o'clock at night or 6:05.
Time to wrap up.
Give me a poke, right? I think that is really going to be a big element of what happens in the future, that it sort of happens to you as a user, but it's your organization pushing you along to be more productive.
Yeah.
But by the same token of things we've talked about before, the organization needs to decide to do some of these things. Many of these things do not turn on by default. You saw it when you went into that app screen. Some of them said request.
Yes.
And not in every case, but in some of those cases, it's because the org has excluded certain apps or certain categories of apps, or specifically included them, right? So orgs need to really dive into this.
Yeah.
And understand the value add that comes out of these tools. And to your point about experimentation, give your employees the opportunity within a certain set of boundaries, right?
Of course, yeah.
To experiment with new ways of doing work, some of the applications, ways that they can streamline the business.
Yeah. Well, I think now more than ever, the old mantra of there's an app for that is absolutely true. You can find it right here within your Microsoft Teams environment. So, but George, this brings our podcast to an end. I really do hope folks start to leverage more apps. Do not fear the app. Dive on in and enjoy the ride. But remember to subscribe to Tech Unmuted on your favorite podcast platform. And you can also subscribe and follow us on YouTube so you don't miss the next episode. Until next time, remember this, stay connected.
Visit fusionconnect.com/techunmuted for show notes and more episodes. Thanks for listening.